nothing so blinding as a simple piece of white paper. Haven't begun, still waiting for the phrase that comes from somewhere else, the one that surprises when later read. Of course, no one knows better than a writer the myth of inspiration. Or, as Stephen Crane observed, inspiration is nice, but it's good to be sitting at the typewriter when it happens. The real work is the keyboard, the chair, an empty room, a silent phone. The stack of books, those you admire most, the only company allowed. The pain of such deliberate deprivation day after day after day. And how months into it you sit at a dinner party empty of comment, your own life peopled by characters only you know. Walking around town, making calls, drinking coffee, going out, feeding the mental bank, the question nags, or simply procrastinating. I rifle through my bookshelves, glancing at random pages, hoping something, anything, will spark. At the very least, sifting through the collection for my heroes, in particular the ones who might help me now with this. Bukowski, Gogol, Salter, Duras, Vonnegut, Salinger, Phillips, Hempel, Jones, Bass, Carver, Moore. The ones who have taught and continue teaching me whatever I do know, among which is that the beginning cannot be ground out, thought through, or reasoned with. It comes from someplace else, surfacing, I think, or maybe I mean alighting. Whether it comes from above or below, all I know is the beginning has to soar, has to begin that inner high wire act, all the while knowing that every word must be worthy of somebody, of anybody else's eyes. When I refused to sign with the studio unless I was given the right to do my own adaptation, or got first shot anyway, as Maggie immediately pointed out, I was all swagger and master, the cool strut. How hard could it be, I thought, then? Now, of course, the effort required looms monumental. But then I've always balked at beginnings. Fine when I'm in the middle, when I've hit my stride, but something about starting strikes me false, the need to work oneself up like a horse behind the gate, rearing before the bell. Try to talk myself down from the absolute blank of it, the stunned ignorance as to how to proceed. Type, exterior, day. Then sit with my hands on the keyboard, minutes, an endless period of time. My wife, the single recurring phrase. It's 3 hours later in New York, where everything, as she pointed out to me, happens first. Where is she right now? At the gym, hair pulled into a tight ponytail, she's stepping, determined, up and up and up, going nowhere. Sweat, her sole purpose, the single destination. It is, I think, the only mindless thing she does all day. Outside, the sun shines relentlessly, mocking. How can anyone think seriously in this town? The light crowds everything out, every nuance, every shadow. Finally, leave the hotel, get in the car, drive up into the hills along Mulholland, see the Hollywood sign, enormous letters, crooked on a hill. A town that advertises itself. Went back down in East on Franklin with no destination until I saw the sign, Griffith Park. Turned on Western and followed the winding road into the canyon further, all the way to the top, where busloads of tourists were unloading before the observatory. I didn't stop the car, just drove back down, aimlessness like a nervous disorder. Parked at the bottom near some picnic benches. A woman sitting alone, reading, a child playing at her feet. When I sat at a table nearby, she didn't even look up. Took my notebook out, still can't suppress the wave of self-consciousness inevitably felt in attempting to write in public. I want the solace of other human faces around me, the sense of having escaped solitary confinement, but always end up paralyzed. Ultimately, the act too private. Feels like sitting on the john with the door open, pretending you don't care if anyone sees. I sit hunched over my papers, sunglassed, fraudulent, and all I'm thinking is whether she's married or not. Does she love her husband? Do they still have sex when they go to bed at night? Does she look at other men? She hasn't, as far as I can tell, acknowledged my existence, not even for a second. But I know how women can be. How Maggie is. Walking down the street, staring straight ahead, she seems oblivious to the men around her, catches everything. Who looks at her? How? That man, she'll mutter about some Bowery drunk staggering to gape after her, needs to get some sleep. Women, they've trained themselves to notice everything without ever seeming to look around. To look invites attention, Maggie says, and I get enough unwanted without having to ask for more. Keep flashing on her that last night, how she changed out of her slouchy clothes before Connor came over, how she darkened her eyes, how every time I sat next to her, she jumped up, muttering. Check on dinner, she'd say. Hate it when the bread gets burned. But then it did, and she forgot dessert altogether. Sit here now obsessing, I can't shake it, about the way it was, the way she was the last night in New York City. Coming out of the bedroom when Connor arrived, capable, despite the 12 years we've somehow stacked between us, of surprising me with her beauty. She was possessed of an energy she calls forth sometimes, a kind of fire, wild. You can see it, feel it in the air around her, see it in her eyes. It's a passion, not just for life. Life, she likes to say, is drudgery. But for this particular moment, now, and now, and now, and now. So that being with Maggie when she's like that heightens everybody's awareness, makes people greedy for her, makes them crave proximity. And maybe because it's not entirely under her control, it makes her giddy, too. It has a sexual edge always, but it also, especially when we're with friends, creates a fine, sweet camaraderie. At home with the two of them that night, like so many other nights before, she was a brilliant thing, my wife. Glimpses of her mind like flashes of light, the sting of her wit a fine lash, always balanced by her goofiness. She was Matahari with knobby knees, tripping over her own laces. Giggling, sexy, falling into Connor's lap, she was the evening star, and while it made of us collaborators, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, indulging the women both adore, none of it is possible for me, neither the intimacy nor the ease, without the absolute certainty, so strong it has its own presence, or so I've thought, that come the end of the day, the end of the evening, when she's tired, when it's all over, that come the end of everything, the years of our lives themselves, it would have always been me whom she had entrusted it all to, her secrets and her lies, her brilliance and her bitterness. That it was me and only me who had to know her, to whom she had to tell it all. And me only who kept her warm and sacred and close. So that ultimately it never mattered whose lap she fell onto or upon whose shoulder she momentarily rested her head, because she would still always choose me. Meet me at 5, he'd said, that was all. I can hear the child talking nonsense, sing-song, wholly absorbed in his own pretense. The woman seems equally absorbed by her book. I can see the title from where I sit. My sister and I, it says, and beneath, written like a signature, Friedrich Nietzsche. It is not, I think, the usual thing. I turn back to my paper and hear it all again, Connor's voice in our machine. Meet me at 5. Nothing else. The intimacy of such curtness, such command. We rise at the same time, the woman and I, and the unexpected simultaneity of it makes us both look. Hi, her child says, the greeting so clearly for me I raise my hand in a wave. Hi. She smiles between us. She seems distracted by the environment or maybe something in the book she's just been reading. It's nice out here, I say. Immediately think how banal it sounds, not at all what I wanted to say. The light here, I say then, surprise myself with the desire to speak, to command her attention. Where are you from? She asks, all three of us moving toward our cars, her son slightly ahead of her, tugging her forward. She acts unaware of his resistance. She keeps well enough behind me that I cannot see her face. New York, I say, city. It's not like a city here, she says, only looking at me when she's reached her car, an old Buick from the 70s, its dark green paint rusting off. No, I say, and feel its urban absence the way amputees must a phantom limb. How radically immediate the streets are the second you step outside, and how human. People brushing past each other in narrow doorways, the comforting inescapability of touch, everyone cowering beneath the same fierce winter, soldiers all enduring. But once you get used to the trees, she says, she makes a gesture, then doesn't finish a sentence, and it is oddly revealing, makes me see her as if for the first time. The oval of her face, her skin, I see only now luminescent, totally devoid of makeup. We look at each other for a moment, curious, and then her child speaks. Okay, Mommy, he says, let's go. 3, I'm guessing, no older. Okay, Walter, she says, the casual respect in her tone unusual to hear spoken to a child so young. Bye, Walter, I say, and he turns around, pleased to hear his name. Bye, he calls out, so bright I smile, the expression an involuntary reflex. She drives away first, and I see her plate, one of its corners unscrewed so it spirals out and away from the body of the car. The letters on it, an unintelligible row of consonants, a Y and two R's, an Icelandic rune. The 7th of January, Los Angeles.